Hello, this is Kim Hallen with Unbridled, and welcome to episode 2 of Tempo's Journey of Emotional Healing. This is the backstory. So Tempo was born in the wee hours of the morning on March 19th, 2007, and this is the first video footage I have of her. It was taken at daybreak, and as you can see, she was just a precious, beautiful little filly, and she was given the registered name Lark's Eternal Destiny in honor of her sire and her dam. Just like all babies, Tempo was born a beautiful, innocent, living being with no emotional baggage, and she was basically a clean slate, and that was such an exciting thing for me. This was the first foal that I had raised from birth, and I was really excited about all the possibilities with my dream horse. The first thing you need to know about Tempo is that as soon as she had her legs under her, this little filly was wide open, full throttle all the time. She just loved life, and she was exuberant and full of energy. And we used to joke that for the first, few months of her life, she never walked anywhere. If Tempo wanted to go somewhere, she ran. Maybe she trotted a little, but mostly she ran. In some ways, I think we should have called her Forrest Gump instead of Tempo. The other thing to know about Tempo is that even as a little baby, she was super expressive with her tail. And she would flick it around, and at the time I didn't really know. I thought that was maybe just what all babies do, because I hadn't raised a baby before. Here she is again. This was maybe a week or two old now, a couple weeks I guess, and again just running, loving life, full of energy, really healthy, happy baby. Mom was pretty low-key, but Tempo, she didn't have other babies to play with, which was unfortunate, but she made her own fun and pretty much had, the farm. She ruled the farm. Now, in terms of Tempo's training, she was introduced from an early age to both natural horsemanship or negative reinforcement training and positive reinforcement training, which is also called clicker training. I had years of experience in both natural horsemanship and clicker training, and our other horses were trained in both, and so it was important to me to introduce Tempo to both and to figure out what was the best approach for her. So these videos here just show some of the early training I was doing with her, using kind of natural horsemanship methods and getting her used to movement and touch. And as you can see, she was, at liberty next to Mom. We did it where she was really safe, and it was all very gentle, and she took to things really well. Like I said, she was a very confident filly, and loved the attention, and just was wanting to be part of the middle of everything, and she took everything really in stride. I would work with her mom, and as you can see, she would just tag along, and everything was a big game, and it was all just super fun to her. But she was being introduced to how we worked with horses, and what the equipment was, and just the general pace of things and activity, and she wasn't put off by any of it. She is a super smart filly, mare now, and she took to training really well. So these videos just are here, these clips, to show you a little bit about how her early beginning was started. And again, this is kind of more a natural horsemanship beginning than the positive reinforcement, but I'll talk in a minute about how I switched to mostly positive reinforcement with this particular filly. Now, I also wanted to include a few of these video clips of me trimming Tempo's feet, her very first trims, while she was napping in the pasture. So she would play hard, and then, like any growing child, she would nap hard. But I really wanted to show you that when Tempo was young and prior to the trauma with her injury, she didn't have any issues with me touching her feet or messing with her feet. And you'll see some other video of that in a few minutes. But the reason I ultimately switched over from natural horsemanship methods to clicker training with Tempo is because after I started to introduce pressure to her, to ask her to move forward or sideways or anything else, she became incredibly stressed out. In fact, the first time that I ever did it, and it wasn't much pressure at all, I actually was holding her kind of between my arms with one arm at her chest and one arm under her rump, and was just encouraging her with a little pressure to take a step forward. She froze and got this really scared look in her face, and I really wasn't quite sure what was happening. And I added just a little more pressure to try and encourage her to take a step, and she literally crumbled to the ground. Like her legs gave out, and she was in a clump on the ground and breathing really hard and was clearly terrified. So I can't explain it to this day, but from the beginning, Tempo could not handle pressure, and she would sort of panic when it happened. Not freak out panic, but again, she just sort of collapsed. So I made a promise to her when she did that. It was really kind of traumatic for me. And I promised her that I would use positive reinforcement with her. And as you can see in these videos, she was like super engaged. She loved clicker training. Again, she was expressive with her tail, which, in hindsight, maybe that was telling me some things about how she was really feeling. But, for the most part, when she did clicker training, her ears were forward. She's very sensitive, and I had to adjust my approach. I learned a lot from her because if you don't get it right, she would tell you. So she trained me as much as I trained her. But overall, this period in our life together was super fun. There are a lot of videos out on YouTube from my days of clicker training her as a baby. At that time, there wasn't much available out there about how to train foals using clicker training. So that's part of why we documented everything. And you can really follow her progress. And you can see here again, she was really good for a filly her age with her feet. And, I never forced her into anything, and she was quite cooperative and, just trying to figure things out. Again, when you see me touch her, you see her tail going here too. So, there's a question in my mind of whether she was pushing through some emotional thresholds at that time in order to earn the treats. And now that I have a more educated eye, I would pay more attention to some of these subtle signs that she was showing even back then. But at the time, I really didn't notice that. This video here, this clip, is of me with her in the trailer. So I did teach her to halter and lead using positive reinforcement. And this was, I think, the very first time that I had her in the trailer, and I was just introducing her to the sounds. I was clicking the latches and moving the door a little bit, and giving her rewards for confidence and for curiosity. But you see here, she is alert, which she always was, but the tail is quiet. She was really responsive. Using positive reinforcement, she learned quickly how to not so much move off of pressure as much as I would give her cues with my hands, and she would respond to those. With any horse, when I'm introducing them to the trailer, I would never hold her on there. If she wanted to get off, I would let her get off. But, she's very eager to earn rewards here. And again, she was just a really confident filly and seemed to be quite happy and well adjusted. Now, we certainly had our moments, and like I said, she was she's a perfectionist, and she kept me on my toes, and she'd let me know if I was not being fair in my training or my timing wasn't good, things like that. But generally speaking, this was a very good and happy first year for both of us. And so I wanted you to see what her childhood was like prior to her injury, so you could have a basis of comparison. Certainly you can see that there was no aggression in her at that time. So I just wanted to show you here. This video was taken literally probably a couple of weeks before she suddenly came up lame. And maybe somebody who has a really, really good eye, better than me, could notice that she could have perhaps been having some pain already in that right hind leg, but it never slowed her down. She was still running pretty much everywhere she went when she wasn't in training mode. And here she's just really enjoying playing with Shoki, who was her uncle. And so I wanted to show the contrast between her life before the injury, and in a minute I'm going to show you the video that we took. It wasn't the morning that she came up lame. It was actually the next morning. So here's that video clip, and it's really hard for me to look back and watch this video for several reasons. Number one, obviously she's in a lot of pain and discomfort, but also this is the moment when our relationship changed. And because I was so concerned about her physical well-being became more important to me than the emotional relationship between us and her emotional health. And unfortunately, when we're up against a crisis, a lot of times that happens, but there are stakes and consequences when that happens. So I was I needed to get this video for my vet, who had been there the day before and not able to diagnose it, and wanted to get some video of her taking a few steps. So I felt like I had to do this, and I was having to use pressure, and not a lot of force, but you can just see in her face that she doesn't understand why I'm asking her to take these steps that hurt. And the pain is actually the coffin bone is in the hoof, inside the hoof capsule, for those who don't know. So there was no swelling or pain or heat anywhere in her leg when the vet was there. So it took us a couple of weeks to actually get a diagnosis that it was a coffin bone cyst, which is not technically an injury. It's a developmental bone disease, but that's getting into more detail than you need here. But so right now the pain was in her foot, but she was having to contort herself to avoid the pain. And so that created pain in other areas of her body, especially over time. And then these pictures show you, this was the stall, makeshift stall. It was an outdoor stall that she was confined in for, as I've said before, about 8 months. And I don't have video of that time. That was a really challenging time for both me and Tempo, and I wasn't in any kind of frame of mind to be documenting it. But I just wanted to show you that she did live in an open air stall. It could have been worse, but for a horse that was just as vibrant and lively and gregarious as she was, and who had so much variety and choice in her daily life, to then go to this kind of living. And I always made sure that one of the other horses was there with her, and they could interact over the walls, so she was never alone. But this was just an incredibly huge change for Tempo, and this is where things started to unravel for us. Tempo was kicking down the boards of this stall on a daily basis, and I was having to go to work and leave her during the day, and we were both just incredibly stressed out for many months and not knowing what her future was going to be. There was a diagnosis about a 50% chance that I was going to end up having to put her down, and she wasn't going to even ever be comfortable as a pasture ornament. So there was a lot going on emotionally for both of us during this time, and And what you're going to learn as the series progresses is that even though I've called this Tempo's journey of emotional healing, the truth is that it was my journey of emotional healing as much as hers. And we helped one another figure out how to move forward from here. So stay tuned for episode 3, where I will tell you more about what was going on with me as well as with Tempo during those 8 months of confinement.